What's going on, everybody, and welcome on in to the Dawg House here. It is Tuesday night. It means it's two-show Tuesday, and you're hanging out with me, not just for this show, but for the next show, too. Make sure you're hanging out at 9 o'clock for Garage Beers Live, but for right now, we've got our Browns preview show, and I'm really excited for it because I've got a great guest coming on with me in just a little bit. Before I get to that, we're brought to you proudly here on the OBR streaming network, so make sure you get over to the OBR.com. Make sure you hit subscribe over there. All the best Browns coverage happens on the OBR. So get over to the OBR.com. And then whether you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're at, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit like and jump in, because right now the OBR is going 6 days a week with live coverage, with our shows, with our pre and post games and all of that. Again, nobody does it like the OBR. So make sure you are tuned in and subscribed. With you as always, I'm your host, Michael Keefe. Find me online at Garage Beers Mike. And like I said, it's a big week. Browns coming off a tough loss. Just when we thought, man, we could get excited a little bit again, now we can't get excited. 2 straight losses for the Browns, and things are not going to get easier as the Kansas City Chiefs are coming into town. And I'm not going to waste any time bringing my special guest in, because this is a really good one. This man played for the Kansas City Chiefs. You would know him as one of the most efficient wide receivers in Chiefs history. A man that was targeted 4 times in his career. He caught 4 touchdown passes. And by the way, he was also an offensive lineman, a second-round pick of the Chiefs. And now he is a host on the Bleav Network's Bleav In Chiefs podcast. I'm bringing him in right now. It's Joe Valerio. Joe, welcome on into the Dawg House.
Hey, Mike. Great to be with you, man. I'm super excited for this game, Mike. I have a great connection to the Browns, obviously, with Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. He's a fellow Quaker, University of Pennsylvania grad, stud player there in the Ivy League. So, always pulling for Kev, even though, got this affiliation with the Chiefs. I love seeing his success over the years. And, it means a lot when he's successful, repping the Ivy League and also repping Penn. And to boot, he really is a fantastic human being and a great guy. So super torn, on this game as far as, rooting for the Chiefs, playing for the Chiefs, and seeing Kevin out there, Coach Stefanski. But yeah, Mike, it's great to be with you. It's crazy because when you look at the quality of the wins the Browns have had, look, 3 wins doesn't make a lot of people happy. But, I was going through and prepping for the show tonight with you and looking at the quality of the wins. And it's pretty interesting, if you gave them quality points, right? Beating Baltimore, beating Pittsburgh, it's kind of like there's something there for this team, right? You look at the Eagles, right? That close game with my hometown Birds, right? 20-16, and just how they hung super tough in a tough place to play in Philly. A touchdown to the Bengals. I know they're having their struggles, but they're still a high caliber team, as struggling as they are. Putting up 32 points against Denver. I mean, it's like I said, the quality of the wins they've had have been great. It's just putting some of the pieces together this year, and that just seems to happen in the NFL sometimes.
Well, the problem, Joe, and I appreciate the positives. We need as much positive talk as we can get about the Browns. The problem is, if you were going to subtract quality points for losses, the Browns would be in the hole by about 1 million. They've lost to every team they were supposed to beat, save for the Jaguars. So it's been they've basically hung in every game. And actually, to be honest with you, Joe, outside of a couple games where the Browns have gotten beat pretty good, this last game against Pittsburgh, it's reminiscent. Don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to think I'm crazy right here, but it's reminiscent. There's a lot of 1-score games that have happened with the Cleveland Browns this year. There's a lot of games that they were in. You brought up the Philly game. I mean, I think a lot of people think we should have won that game.
There's a lot of people that say that they should have or could have. I mean, that's saying something.
There's a lot of games like that. They should have won that Denver game. There's a lot of games like that. It looks a little bit like the other side. It's like the Chiefs are like the upside down version of the Browns, or maybe I should reverse that. The Browns are definitely the upside down version of the Chiefs, where, man, I look at the Chiefs schedule, Joe, before coming on here, and I was doing the same thing you were doing. Outside of 1 or 2 games where they I know they lost a game by double digits. Their only loss came by double digits to the Bills. And I think they maybe won 1 game by double digits. And every single game the Chiefs have played this year has been a single digits close game, including the one they played just this weekend. The Chiefs have become the masters of 1-score close games.
Absolutely. And a vast majority of them, on the comeback trail, having to give Patrick Mahomes the ball back with a little bit of time left. I mean, that's been probably for a Chiefs fan, that's been the scariest part, right? It's one thing to win by a score when you were up by 2 and, somebody drives down the field, there's a couple seconds left, a minute left, and then you got to try an onside kick and you don't get it. Like, it actually hasn't been that way. They haven't been dominant wins. They haven't been dominant one score wins. The most of them have been the Chiefs having to sort of score at the end and win the game or block a field goal like they did. So it's been a tricky season for them to say the least. And look, I know you can't do the associative property of math, and you can't say, well, if this team beats this team and you beat this team, then you would beat that team, right? Like A is greater than B is greater than C. You just can't kind of do that in football. However, you can't help but think, because I was at the Chiefs game this week, and I watched. I wanted to see in person how this line reacted with shuffling guys around, bringing in DJ Humphrey at the left tackle spot. What that was going to mean for Jawan Taylor, knowing he wasn't going to get any help, and they're pushing all the protections to the left, and I wanted to see it, but I did sneak away and watch most of the Bills game prior.
Yeah.
And I have to say, that Bills-Rams game, look, the Chiefs homer in me doesn't want to say this, and there's probably a lot of Chiefs fans that would get mad at me for saying this, but listen, I got to be objective too. I can't just be the former player homer. I think if the Chiefs are playing either team in that game, they're getting beat by at least 2 scores. I just, again, you can't do the associative property thing, and it's hard to compare environments and game plans and all that stuff. But just objectively, if the Chiefs had played the Rams and or the Bills in that particular game, I don't think the Chiefs even hang, because that's how good the Rams and the Bills looked in that game. I mean, that was a barn burner. That was a shootout, and the Chiefs just haven't been able to keep up with teams. They're the ones slowing the game down.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are keeping everything under the roof. And if a team starts going like that, that's what I fear the most from what's happened to the Chiefs, is they have not been able to consistently score, only twice, and one was an overtime. Well, 3 times they've scored 30 points twice in the regular time of the game. Yep. And they've had the 130-point win against Tampa, a 30-24 overtime win where they've scored 30. So, really only 2 legitimate games where they've scored 30 or more, which actually they've only scored 30, not more, right? It's only been 30 exactly. So just not the offense that, you have come to see and what a lot of fans have come to respect from the Chiefs. They're winning this stuff with defense. And that was kind of their MO last year. I mean,
yes,
this Chiefs team lived out the absolute cliche that defenses win championships and offenses win games, because that's exactly what this team is living. They are living that mantra right now, and they did it last year, and to win the Super Bowl, because their defense really is what got them through it.
Well, and Joe, you I love it. It feels like you and I have practiced this show, because you keep leading me into what I was going to talk about. This is great. The conversation, every time I have a conversation with somebody about the Chiefs, the conversation continues to be this year, and I'll tell you what it reminds me of, but it continues to be, this looks like the year the Chiefs could get got, right? This looks like the year that somebody can get the Chiefs. And in my head, and maybe this is just the PTSD in me of just thinking that about teams in the past and consistently being wrong, it reminds me a lot of the way people would talk about the Patriots over the course of their runs, because that's the territory the Chiefs are in now. They're in Patriots territory. Every year it would be, Brady's getting a little older. He doesn't look as good. He doesn't have the weapons. Who are these guys on the outside? Is the defense going to be any good this year? And you're always looking for a reason that they're not going to be as good. And so I've heard it all season long on, man, the Chiefs don't look as good this year. They don't look the way they've looked in the past, all that stuff. And then you look up and the Chiefs are 12-1. And I'm going to tell you, Joe, as we get ready, let me strike this. We are not getting ready for the playoffs. There will be no playoffs anywhere near the vicinity that I am in. But as you guys get ready for the playoffs, and as we as fans get ready for the playoffs, if you're going into a game thinking that the Chiefs aren't the favorite, you're wrong. I don't care if it's against Buffalo. I don't care if it's against Baltimore. When you hit the playoffs and it's Patrick Mahomes and it's Andy Reid, if there's anybody that knows how to win in the playoffs, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's just an interesting year to hear so many people saying maybe this is the year they're not as good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have to say with the Bills losing to the Rams, which was great fortune for the Chiefs organization, and looking at the remaining part of the schedule, I mean, the Bills, they still have to run a little bit of a gauntlet. I mean,
Right.
they've still got to get through the Lions, right? And actually the Chiefs mathematically, with the Lions if the Lions can beat the Bills, which it's at Detroit, there's a really good chance because the Lions are rolling and they're fighting for home field, so they got a lot to play for. It's not like they're going to be sitting anybody. And then you look at the Steelers, right? And you look at who else is sort of left that could possibly, take that number one seed away. The Steelers, they could, they've got to play they have to play the Eagles and the Ravens still. Right. So, and they have to play the Chiefs. So if the Chiefs can lock it up if everybody loses and they win. So the Chiefs are really, really playing for that because that Andy Reid, he loves to rest his players. And if the Chiefs can secure home field before Christmas, there is no way that those guys are playing on Christmas Day. And I know the NFL is going to buck against it. And I know they're going to be tweeting or texting Andy Reid, doing something to try to get into, Brett Veach, the GM, or the Hunt family. They're going to be getting in their ears like, dude, you got the Chiefs Steelers on Christmas Day. People want to see that game. Well, guess what? If you got to play on Saturday or Sunday the week before, and you got 4 days because the Chiefs and Steelers are both playing on Saturday that week. 4 days coming into playoff time, no way Andy Reid is going to live any kind of peer pressure or live under any kind of peer pressure. Those guys are sitting and they're not playing. I'm sorry. I mean, I know that happens a lot in the NBA when, you get down when guys are getting rest time. But so anyway, I mean, I went off on a long tangent there, but if the Chiefs lock this thing up, which they probably will, and that's just not me being a homer. That's me saying, look, the math is there. The schedule should play out that way. That should is a big word, right? Dandy Don Meredith, Monday Night Football. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But there are some big ifs in there. But if they do, and they should, they're going to have plenty of time to rest. And I think that can really help that team because they need the rest. I mean, there's a chance that Hollywood Brown is back. Pacheco gets a little healthier. I don't think Rashee Rice is going to make it back or at any particular time. And again, there's my ifs and buts. You think about what this team could have done if they could have gotten some chemistry together. With Hollywood Brown. I mean, I was so waiting for Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice, what that powerhouse trio would do and how it would actually help Travis. Travis is worn out, man. He's worn.
He looks like it.
Doesn't he, though? He just looks tired because he's got to be like the feature guy. He's trying to still get double teams. He's trying to open things up for sort of a lack of better terms, a lackluster receiver room. So there's just a lot of issues going on. And then, Mike, you got to throw in this whole offensive line debacle, right? If Kevin Stefanski doesn't take advantage of what's going on over there at left tackle, if he wants to say, you know what, let's show the world that this team still has something. Granted, like you said, it's not going to be a playoff year, but look, they're playing for a lot of pride. And if they can somehow, get after the left tackle at that position and make something happen and force Patrick to make some mistakes, anything can happen. And we're seeing that with this Chiefs team, no matter who they're playing.
Well, and that leads into, and I know we don't have a terrible amount of long time left, but that leads into just talking about this game and this matchup, because I don't think the Browns, God, it depends on the day, I guess. Some days they look like they're a 3-10 football team. Some days they look like they should have won 8 games. So we'll see with the Browns, but it's a Browns defense that hasn't been as good this year. It's a Browns offense that, really gave itself no chance with Deshaun Watson. And then Jameis Winston has been what Jameis Winston is, which is sometimes he's great and sometimes it's rough and everywhere in between. But when you look at the matchup and you look at the Browns and maybe some of the things that they present challenges for the Chiefs in this game, and I know that's funny to say a 3-10 team against a 12-1 team, but maybe what are some of the areas that you feel like the Browns could challenge the Chiefs in this one?
Well, I'll tell you what the matchups I'm going to look at, right? Is number one, the Captain Obvious statement is what's going to happen up front and what can the Browns do to expose the spot at left tackle. With DJ Humphrey coming, hasn't played in 11 months, right? He's coming off of an injury. He was serviceable in the game. Like he wasn't a world beater. He didn't, I certainly at my advanced age and coming out of 11 months playing a game who I'm coming off of an injury, to be able to do anything even remotely rated, or remotely possible for me to be able to get out there and play. So they're gonna have to focus on that left tackle position, and they're gonna have to try to create an environment over there where they're running X stunts. We called them, like, for a little technical term, we called a Texas stunt was where the tackle goes first and tries to rub through the guard and tackle, and then the end comes around, right? That's called a Texas because the tackle goes first. And then you have your El Paso stunt where the end shoots in and the tackle goes around. The defensive tackle goes around and tries to become the edge rusher, and they replace positions. They're going to have to be doing that kind of stuff over there to create an environment where DJ Humphrey's timing is off, or if it's Wanya Morris, depending on who it is, they're going to have to expose that, because they're not going to really. Patrick doesn't seem to be troubled by the pressure up the middle. He's definitely somebody who knows how to find the pocket within the pocket. So it's coming around the edge. It's that right off of the tackle box where he has his biggest struggles. And then also being able to roll out, right? If you can contain him and keep him in the pocket, but you have to be careful with that too, because when you over contain him, it does open up the middle of the field for him to get up and pump fake and challenge the line of scrimmage. So, again, not to overuse this term, but Captain Obvious statement is focusing the defense on that left tackle position and what that can do to create some pressure and to force Patrick into making quicker throws and trying to make mistakes. On the other side of the ball, we've seen a lot of issues with the defensive backs. And I'll tell you, if you watched at all, or any of your listeners and Browns fans watched the Chargers-Chiefs game in kind of anticipation for this, it was the primetime game on Sunday, so I'm sure people were tuning in and, catching their Sunday Night Football fix in. Herbert was getting dazed back there. I mean, there were, you can always over-exaggerate to make a point, but like there were high school and college quarterbacks that could have been successful in that game if they got that kind of time, right? Like you could have thrown a backup in there, and if you would have given that backup the same amount of time that Justin Herbert was getting, they would at least be relatively successful. I mean, it was getting to the point where I was sitting right on the 40-yard line, and I'm, and a lot of times, I was catching the sideline view, and I was like, man, why can't they get to this guy? Like, so I think if somehow they can, give Jameis some time, give him a little bit of time, protect him, and give him something to throw at. There's some exposure there in the defensive backfield that the Chiefs have had. Whether it's injury, lack of talent, it's probably their weakest spot on defense. I mean, you look at their defensive line they're grinders, and like I said, with the exception of Chris Jones, he's in a whole league by himself. They're grinders. They just keep grinding. They keep throwing more and more guys at you. So they're solid up front. But what they're not doing is they're not winning the one-on-one battle, right? Because what happens in pass protection is generally it's 5 against 4, for most of the time, right? Right.
Right.
If you keep a tight end in or you keep it back in, you can go 6 versus 4. Then you start trying to do numbers games, and if you try to bring a linebacker off the edge or a linebacker up the middle, or you try to bring a corner, you can get into a 5 versus 5 scenario. But generally, it's going to be at least 5 versus 4. And what happens in those situations is either your uncovered guard or your center is going to go one direction or the other and create a double team somewhere. And what was always told to defensive linemen, and what we used to say to the offensive linemen when I coached offensive line, is you have to win the one-on-one battles. And that's what the Chiefs weren't doing. They weren't winning the one-on-one battles. If they were pushing the protection to Chris Jones, which a lot of lines technically do, they will push the protection. That's called pushing the protection. So you're sending your uncovered guy to Chris Jones and declaring that the strength of the formation. And then you got 3-on-2. Create a nice double team, generally on Chris Jones. On the other side, away from that, you've got what are called one-on-one matchups. And those are the matchups that both the offensive line and the defensive line have to win. And that's what the Chiefs weren't winning. They were not winning those one-on-one matchups. And that's because they don't have another premier rusher to support Chris Jones. Like when I was playing for the Chiefs, it was Derek Thomas and Neil Smith. Who do you block? Okay, you push your protection to Derek Thomas because your left tackle's struggling. Well, now you got a one-on-one with Neil Smith. What the heck? How do you block him one-on-one, right? The Chiefs don't really have that right now. I mean, Karlaftis is solid, but he's not Neil Smith. And then what happens is when you get that kind of protection and you give a Jameis Winston or a Justin Herbert in this last game's case against the Chargers, you give them time, you see what can happen. You can pick apart a defense, especially one that is struggling with injury in the defensive backfield. So if I'm a Browns fan, get after the left tackle. Let's see what the defensive coordinator is going to do to get after the Chiefs left tackle and possibly even the right tackle, because Juwan Taylor hasn't had a stellar year either. And then what are you going to do to win those one-on-one pass protections so that you can give Jameis Winston some time to expose a pretty I wouldn't say struggling defensive backfield, but one that's definitely had its problems.
Yeah, as I was looking at this, the thing that came into my head first for the Brown side of things was if Jameis can just avoid the turnover. It feels to me like in watching the bits of Jameis that we've gotten over the past few games, before he makes that first mistake, he can look really good. And it does feel like it snowballs in his head after that first mistake gets made. And it feels like he's having a hard time shaking that. And so if the Browns can stay out of that situation, I don't know what the end result is going to be, but I certainly think they can make this a good football game with the Chiefs in Cleveland if Jameis can just avoid making that mistake throw and keeping that out of his head. And then on the other side of things, honestly, this is going to be terrible analysis on my part, but I can't help it because when you play the Kansas City Chiefs, you just hope and pray that Patrick Mahomes doesn't do something crazy special that just deflates you and beats you, because it always feels like that's what happens in a game. You could be right there with them. You could be on the brink of beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and then Patrick Mahomes is going to make some play that makes you go, how did he just do that? And next thing you know, you're losing, and the Chiefs are on their way to their 13th win. So it's a lot of hoping and praying on that side of the ball. Much less scientific than what you got there. But it just from a perspective of watching the Chiefs, man, it feels like that when you play against them.
Yeah, you can't. Well, number one, you gotta try to at least slow the game down. I mean, the teams that have had the most success this year in making that attempt is they gave the Chiefs a taste of their own medicine, right? They gave Andy Reid a taste of his own medicine of slowing the game down. And that's what, when you look at these scores and you look at the times of possession, you look at the amount of, rushing attempts that the Chiefs have tried, it really becomes a very slow game. This is not the old St. Louis Rams greatest show on turf, run and gun, basketball on grass type games that the Chiefs are playing, which was a little bit of the flavor you got from them 2 to 3 years ago, right? It was like basketball on grass, man. Boom, 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 boom. It's become a little bit more of a grinding game, and mostly because they've had to deal with some injuries up front. They've had to deal with some injuries at the receiving position. They don't have great blocking tight ends. I mean, let's be honest, Travis, he'll mix it up, but he's definitely not the same blocker that he was 3-5 years ago. So it's created something a little bit different, for this team. Patrick's not going to RPO, right? Let's just be honest. He's a drop back quarterback who can beat you with his feet, but he's a drop back quarterback. I mean, there's no RPO to his game, at least for him running the ball. He's not going to be. There's no threat of a quarterback draw like you see with Lamar Jackson or
Right.
you see with Josh Allen. Like, it's just basically a drop back game. Now he will play action, right, which is the predecessor to the RPO, and he will he will do what he can to make it look like it's run, but it's just a different flavor that you're seeing out of this team right now. That's got to be surprising to a lot of fans, knowing who Patrick Mahomes is. But again, to go back to your comment, he just finds a way, and if the Chiefs get up by 2 touchdowns, no matter who they're playing, I'm not saying they're going to do that to the Browns, but when they do get up by 2 touchdowns, it does get a little harder to come back on them now, because they are getting a little bit better at grinding the ball out.
Yes.
Which they didn't. Like 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs 3 years ago was like, all right, we're down by 2 touchdowns, but you know what? If we can get after Mahomes, if we can run the ball a little bit and chip away and pick one of those scores back up and control the time of possession, like, we're still in this game, because the Chiefs were a little bit more high. They were more high severity, less frequency, right? To use a risk management term.
Yes.
and I think that's what they were. Now they're actually flipping the narrative a little bit. They're more of a high frequency team where they're just trying to keep the ball a lot, grind it out. And you just don't see big plays out of them, Mike, right? I mean, you don't see them airing the ball out. I mean, as fast as Worthy is, the fastest guy coming out of the combine, one of the fastest guys in the league, you just don't see Patrick throwing bombs.
Well, it's just it's not the same. That was always the worst part about playing the Chiefs, is when they had Tyreek Hill, and you would Patrick Mahomes in the worst trouble in the backfield, and then he would just launch a ball down the field, and Tyreek could just go get it wherever it was.
Yeah, they just don't have that anymore. Yes. So look, Browns fans should have hope that there's some whatever you want to call it, giant killing out there that, to try to spoil a little bit of a season, because you're playing for pride, man. These guys, trust me, even though they're not focused on the playoffs for the first time in a while, those guys are still out there, looking to try to improve their stock. They're playing as a team. They're going to be out there playing for a lot of pride. I know Coach Stefanski will have them playing, have them fired up for this game. So again, this could be one of those games, a trap type of game for the Chiefs, where not that they ever look past teams, but they're just not playing that well right now, to be honest. I mean, how could you say? Isn't it crazy that we could say that of a team that's like 12-1? Like
12-1, right?
Well, how does that even? But it's true, Mike. Isn't it true? Like, they're just not playing that well.
You know what, Joe? Come to Cleveland. We'll show you about not playing well. Okay, man. I was going to ask you, as a former player, I forgot about this. I looked this up earlier. I was going to ask you, as a former player, like, when you go through a season like the Browns are going, but then I looked at your record as a player, and you didn't go through any seasons like the Browns are going through.
Fortunately, in Kansas
City, 9 games.
Yeah, fortunately,
less than 9 games.
Yeah, fortunately, in Kansas City, I did go to the playoffs in the 6 years I was there, and that was a pretty special to be like, of course, as an ex-player watching these teams win Super Bowls, we always like to say, we built the foundation. They're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like that's what we want to say when we don't have a Super Bowl ring on your finger. But they were really good years. They were rebuilding years for sure. Of course, back to a wonderful Browns legacy of Coach Marty Schottenheimer coming to Kansas City and finding, good playoff success, never winning the big one, but we did have a lot of really good success. So, it is hard. College, I can go back to college. We struggled in college a little bit. I remember what that was like when you weren't playing for anything except for pride. And and that's all you have. But you know what? If you're a competitive athlete, that's what you're out there doing, regardless of whether you're 0-15 or 15-0. You still play the game the way it should be played, and that's what I think. I'm sure you're probably seeing out of this Browns team is because they're in it. They're in the games. This isn't a team that has rolled over, and that Coach Stefanski is building something that's going to come back, and it's a couple of pieces of the puzzle, and they'll be right back in the mix.
All right, I got two little quick hitters before you let you go. One, I mentioned it in my intro to you, but it's relatively commonplace in today's NFL that you'll see a team line up an offensive lineman as an eligible receiver, and a couple times a year you'll see one of the teams fire off to an offensive lineman for a touchdown. But back in the early 90s, you brought up Marty Schottenheimer, that was your coach. That didn't happen a lot. That wasn't a thing that happened a ton. But Joe Valerio, it happened to you and the Kansas City Chiefs. You had 4 catches, 4 touchdowns in your career. Man, how did you and Marty come up with it? And how excited were you that you were the guy that was chosen to be that guy?
Oh my God, Mike, I was Chris Carter before Chris Carter was Chris Carter, right? I only scored touchdowns, right? I like to laugh about that. I was a wide receiver. That's what Joe Montana called me one time. He said, "Man, you're like a wide receiver."
The wide receiver.
He just, what happened was, Mike, we were practicing a play that was not a holdover of our old offense, because we had very little holdovers from the Marty Ball, Christian Okoye and Barry Word, 260-pound tailback offense that we were before Joe Montana got there. But we did have this sort of one play that was similar, where I was always what we called the tank tight end, because even when the Chiefs were smash mouth, we did not have big tight ends. We had Jonathan Hayes, who was a big tight end, 6'5", 260, one of those big guys. But all of our other tight ends were like H-backs. So if we were going to go to a 3 tight end or a 2 tight end and maybe bring in the receivers tight into a slot or whatever, I always came in as like sort of the second heavy tight end. So it was something I always did with Kansas City, and which was kind of fun to have like a role, right? But my God, in those first 2 years, Marty Ball, like there was no tackles were even thinking about going out. But we had this one play that was like sort of a carryover, where I would go like 5 yards into the end zone, and I would obligatorily put my hands up in the air as if somebody was going to throw me the ball. I was a human screen, Mike. I was a human screen. Like, it was basically, I was there for the crossing pattern behind, to rub a linebacker, or if somebody was in man, or just to be like a little bit of a zone buster, to like, at least if they saw the red color, they would think if they were in some kind of a tight zone down there in the end zone, they'd have to at least respect that I was standing there. So we had this play in at practice, and we're running it, and Montana gets the ball, he drops back, and he's staring at me, and I'm I got these giant. They're going back to the 90s. Exactly, like I'm shaking my head, like no, and I'm like, I'm pointing at guys. I'm like, no, look at Keith Cash, he's wide open. Look at Willie Davis, he's wide open. Like, and Joe gets this little and he had that great devilish smile. And he just starts smiling. He's pumping the ball, and he fired it at me. And it was like, oh my God, he's throwing the ball at me. And I know exactly what was going through his mind, right? He's like, I'm going to make this guy look foolish and make it, because he loved to play jokes and get a laugh. Now, what Joe didn't realize is that I actually didn't think I was even going to play football in college. I thought I was going to play baseball.
Okay.
So I was a catcher. And so I had really, good soft hands, because I was a good defensive catcher, and I was good at scooping the ball up. I was soft with the with the strike zone and framing pitches. So I had good hand-eye coordination. I boxed for 5 years, as a youth, and so I had good hands. And I played basketball, and I was a good receiver on the baseline. And he fires this thing, and Mike, I catch the darn thing, and like it was nothing. It was like, phew. And Paul Hackett, like, first of all, Joe's eyes get like real big, like, what just happened? Like, that, where my whole practical joke just got shot. Paul Hackett comes running over, and he's like, oh my God, you can catch. I said, well, I'm holding this thing. And I threw it back to him. And he's like, he turns to me, literally, he says, Joe, he said, you're going to catch a touchdown pass this year. And I literally said to myself, wow, this West Coast offense really does open things up when 300-pound guys are like threats.
Yeah, right.
And so we started talking about Guy McIntyre, who was a guard for the Super Bowl era 49ers, and how he had caught a touchdown. And he just, so Paul said he put it in and it just kept rolling. And I don't know why people weren't covering me. The one against the Raiders was a slam and it was out. It was the whole, because we have Marcus Allen. Referees are jumping into the pile. Like, everybody thinks Marcus has the ball. Like, rah. But when we played the Cardinals after Joe retired, and I scored against the Cardinals, I think Buddy Ryan like jumped into the pile at one point, like because Marcus had a great fake. And so, I did the one against the Raiders. I did the one against the 49ers, which was an unbelievable game to score in, the Steve Young, Joe Montana shootout on September 11th, 1994. The one that was the most bizarre was on Monday night in that Elway Montana shootout where Marty had never won it at Mile High. And I know all the Browns fans know this as well.
Yeah,
he could not win at Mile High. Except for this one game we won, and it was a shootout and came down to who had the ball last. And I actually caught one over my shoulder because I was literally the fourth receiver. But Kimball Anders, our fullback, fell. Keith Cash got held up at the line. Derek Walker ran right in front of the official, and it just blew Joe's like vision, and he couldn't see him for a second because he kind of saw the color of the receiver, and then he turns and he threw it over my shoulder. And I know exactly what he was thinking because he told me, he's like, oh my God, I got to actually throw it to this guy out here. I turned over. But the thing was, Mike, I was like 4 yards out from the end zone and I had no idea what to do. No idea. I'm like, what do I do? I dove in from the 4.
Yes.
Because I was so scared of getting hit. Like I hadn't been hit. I think it was like 7th grade was the last time I actually got tackled. So, I just dove. From the 4-yard line. It was crazy, but it was a lot of fun to live every lineman's dream and to hear your name called for something other than 73 holding, 73 face mask, 73 offsides. Like it was like, something that I've been waiting for pretty much my whole career. And, but it was really fun. And it was a great, it was a joy to be able to do that. And especially catch him from Joe Montana.
Oh my gosh. What a story. I'm ending it with that. That was amazing. Joe, listen, appreciate it. Appreciate your insight on the Chiefs. We will see what happens in Huntington Bank Field on the shores of Lake Erie on Sunday. The 3-10 Cleveland Browns, gross, against the 12-1 Kansas City Chiefs. But the way both teams have played games this year, I would anticipate, oh God, I'm going to look so bad for saying this and it doesn't happen. But I feel like it's going to be a close game, just the MO of both teams. So we'll see what happens. But Joe, if you want to hear more of Joe, which I do after this, the Bleav In Chiefs podcast, you do the Bleav In Chiefs podcast, and the Bleav Network is amazing. You do a great job with that. If you want to hear more about what they're saying leading into this game, go check out Joe. Go check out the Bleav In Chiefs podcast. And Joe, we really appreciate you coming on and joining me. Here.
Mike, great to be with you. I wish Coach Stefanski all the best and finishing out the season strong. And he's a fantastic guy, and the team's going to have they got bright things ahead. And with a guy like that at the helm, and with a city that loves football as much as Cleveland, and Cleveland rocks. And to quote the Drew Carey show, I mean, I really do have a real passion for the history that is Cleveland, and I'm glad to see the Browns back there and the franchise back. It's they're NFL royalty. When you think about the Browns and the history of the organization, it really is. And wishing them all the best, wishing the Browns a great game, and just everybody comes out healthy and you have a good competitive game. And I'm with you, Mike. It's going to be close. I can't deny it. Like I can sit here and say, this team that's 12-1 is going to come in and roll. Maybe that's a different. If it's this Browns team against the Chiefs team 2 years ago, maybe I say it's a two-score game, a 2-touchdown win. Right. Look, you can't promise that anymore, even with the 12-1 Chiefs. So I think the Chiefs come out of this one, to be honest, speaking totally objectively, but I think the Browns are going to give them everything they have.
Man, Joe, what a great time. Appreciate you, man. Good
Thanks,
luck
Mike.
with the rest of the season. We'll talk to you again.
Appreciate you. Anytime, man. Give me a shout. Jump on with you anytime. Browns, Chiefs. Doesn't have to be Browns, Chiefs. Just want to talk some football, tell some funny O-line stories. If your listeners are into hearing what it was like to live in the trenches and, battle as an Ivy League offensive lineman in the NFL, like what was I think? Like what happened? I'm blocking Biff McNutty from Harvard, and then I'm going against Howie Long and Reggie White. Like what? Right. I was like, what just happened? And so yeah, I'm happy to come on and share those stories anytime, and just kind of share some experiences from the trenches with your listeners. So
100% taking you up on that offer, Joe. Appreciate your time
again,
and good luck covering the Chiefs the rest of the season.
Take care, Mike. Have a great one, bud.
Thanks, Joe. Oh, that was awesome. Joe Valerio, former Chiefs offensive lineman, kind of Mr. Do Everything there, but also, again, I got to give them a shout out because they have been so good to me and so good to this show and our network, the Bleav Network. Cam Rogers over there. Every time I send that guy an email and say, hey, do you have any ideas of who I could have on or whatever, he instantly gets back to me and says, oh, you should have this guy and this guy. And again, we've got a Bleav show here in Cleveland. A friend of ours from the Garage Beers podcast, Eric Metcalf, Spencer German, they do the Bleav in Browns podcast. So make sure you check out the Bleav Network. Check out the Bleav in Chiefs. Again, I say it for you guys every week. If you want to hear what they're saying about our matchup from their point of view, go check that out and see what Joe is saying over there on the Bleav in Chiefs podcast. That was great. I was planning on doing initially we talked about maybe doing 20 minutes, and then I was going to talk a little bit more, but you know what? 8:41. We got another show coming up at 9:00. I think that's just going to do it for the Doghouse here. So again, big time shout out to my special guest, Joe Valerio from the Bleav in Chiefs podcast. And again, former Chief, big time stuff and really cool. Actually, we will have him back on. Maybe we'll do it on Garage Beers because I feel like that's a guy that could tell some really funny stories, but also would love to get more of that insight out of him on Kevin Stefanski. Again, two Penn guys. Joe played football at Penn. Kevin Stefanski played football at Penn. So there's a little connection there. And it sounds like Joe could give us maybe a little bit more insight as to Kevin Stefanski and how his potential continues to get unlocked. So we will definitely look at having Joe back on. That's going to do it for us on the Doghouse. Thank you to Joe. Thank you to the OBR. The OBR, make sure you're subscribed and tuned in to everything, whether it's at theobr.com or here on the streaming network. Shout out to the OBR for being the best place in Cleveland that covers the Cleveland Browns. And also, you guys get it like an 18-minute break, and then you come back. We got a lot of stuff to talk about on Garage Beers. We got Guardians news that's big time. We've got the Browns and the Chiefs that we'll talk about. We've got college football that we're going to talk about and the playoffs and all that stuff. So we got a lot of stuff going on Garage Beers, and we're going to get into it all. And it starts at 9:00. So go grab your beers and get right back here for that. That's going to do it for the Doghouse. Until next week, go Browns, everybody.